Widow millionaire orders a cake for his son and falls in love with the humble baker, awakening such intense feelings that would change his life forever. You can't miss the end of this story. Subscribe to the channel and comment on what city and country you're watching this video from, and join us. The sweet smell of vanilla and caramel filled every corner of the small pastry shop. The display cases showcased artistically decorated cakes, pies that looked like they came out of a fairy tale, and cookies so perfectly shaped they resembled small jewels. It was a place that radiated coziness and warmth, like a hug made of sugar and affection. Amelia was behind the counter, focused on the final details of a birthday cake ordered by a loyal customer. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, with a few rebellious strands escaping around her face. The apron had slight frosting stains, a proof that she not only ran the pastry shop, but lived every moment of it. She had spent years turning her passion into a business. Since she was little, she had been fascinated by the world of confectionery. Her mother, a talented baker, had taught her the first tricks in her childhood. Over time, Amelia honed her skills, creating her own recipes and perfecting every detail. Her small pastry shop was a reflection of her dedication and love for what she did. But despite the sparkle in her eyes when talking about her creations, Amelia harbored a dream: to expand. She imagined a bigger, more sophisticated space where she could offer courses and turn her passion into something even grander. However, financial challenges and uncertainty about the future made that dream seem distant. As she sprinkled powdered sugar over the freshly baked cookies, the doorbell rang, announcing a new customer. Amelia looked up, and for a moment the world around her seemed to slow down. Daniel entered with firm but discreet steps. He was a tall man with a reserved expression and a look that, despite being serious, carried a subtle melancholy. He wore a sharply tailored dark suit, but not ostentatiously. He seemed like someone used to carrying heavy responsibilities, a man whose life had demanded seriousness and absolute control. He observed the pastry shop for a few moments before walking up to the counter. Amelia noticed the way his eyes analyzed the environment, almost as if trying to decipher what that place represented. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep but contained. "Good morning, how can I help?" Amelia replied with a warm smile. Daniel hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I need to order a birthday cake." "Of course. Who is the cake for?" "For my son. Liam is turning 8. Amelia noticed a brief spark in his eyes when he mentioned his son's name. There was pride, but also a tinge of pain there. She recognized that kind of look, that of someone who had lost something valuable. What a beautiful age. "Do you have anything in mind for the cake? Any theme that Liam likes?" Daniel took a deep breath, as if he wasn't used to dealing with this type of situation. "He likes dinosaurs and chocolate, a lot of chocolate." Amelia smiled. "I think we can create something amazing for him. How about a 3-tiered cake with fondant details? We can make small dinosaurs climbing the sides and maybe a volcano on top that oozes melted chocolate sauce when we cut the cake." Daniel raised an eyebrow as if he hadn't expected such enthusiasm. "Sounds interesting." Amelia laughed. "I promise he will love it." Daniel nodded. For a moment he seemed about to say something else, but he held back. Instead, he took a card out of his pocket and handed it to her. "Here are my contacts. Can we finalize the details later?" "Of course. I'll prepare a sketch and send you some options." He gave a slight nod and turned to leave, but hesitated before reaching the door. He looked back at her again, as if reconsidering something. "Have you always worked with this?" Amelia blinked, surprised by the sudden question. "Yes, since I was little. I've always loved making sweets. My mother used to say that food can carry feelings, and I like to think that every cake, every dessert I make carries a little joy for those who receive it." Daniel absorbed those words, but he didn't comment further. He only gave one last look at the pastry shop before leaving. As soon as the door closed, Amelia felt something different in the air. It was just a customer, nothing more. But for some reason, the encounter left a trail of curiosity in her. Outside, Daniel got into the car, but didn't start the engine immediately. His heart was beating stronger than it should for something as mundane as ordering a cake. He ran his fingers through his hair, sighing. The truth was that, since losing his wife, he had closed himself off from many things. He avoided trivial conversations, cozy places like that pastry shop, and above all, he avoided feeling anything that could threaten the rigid control he had imposed on his own life. But somehow, that woman, with her easy smile and passion for what she did, managed to disturb that order. And that bothered him more than it should. Little did he know that this would be just the first of many encounters, and that from then on, his life would never be the same. In the days that followed, Amelia found herself thinking more than she would like about the unexpected visit from that man. It was not something that usually happened. Customers came and went, ordered their sweets, picked up their orders, and carried on with their lives, but Daniel had left a residue of curiosity in her, a silent presence that refused to disappear. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Daniel faced his own dilemma. Since leaving the confectionery, something in him seemed restless. The sweet scent lingering in the air, the vibrant energy of that woman, the way she talked about sweets as if they were works of art. All of it had left him unsettled. He hadn't allowed himself to think about such things in a long time. Work consumed his hours, and Liam filled the rest of the space in his life. But now, against his will, he had something else occupying his mind. It was only when he received the message from Amelia 2 days later that he realized how much he had been waiting for it. "Hi, Daniel. I made some sketches for Liam's cake. If you can stop by, we can discuss the ideas and tweak the details." The simplicity of the message made him hesitate. He could just ask her to send the options by email, solving everything practically and efficiently. But instead, he picked up the phone and typed, "I'll stop by tomorrow in the late afternoon." And that's exactly what he did. 2. Special order and growing complicity. The next day, when Daniel entered the confectionery again, the atmosphere seemed cozier than the first time. Perhaps it was the irresistible smell of melted chocolate or the soft sound of instrumental music playing in the background. Or maybe it was just Amelia's presence, who welcomed him with a sincere smile. "I'm glad you came," she said, picking up a notebook where she had scribbled some detailed drawings of the cake. Daniel approached the counter and watched as she flipped through the pages, explaining her ideas. "Here, I thought of something more classic. With a smooth frosting and subtle details, this other option has a more playful vibe, with hand-modeled dinosaurs. And this last one," she smiled, pointing to the more elaborate drawing, "it has a volcano that erupts with hot chocolate sauce." Daniel studied the drawings for a few moments before lifting his gaze to her. "You really dedicate yourself to this." Amelia shrugged as if it were obvious. "I love what I do, and I think a birthday cake has to be special. Children don't forget those moments." Daniel felt a pang in his chest. Liam still talked about the cakes his mother made, or rather, he talked about their absence. Since the death of his wife, Daniel had never cared about such things again. Liam's parties had become events organized by others, cold and meticulously planned, but lacking the touch of love a mother always provided. Perhaps without realizing it, he was trying to compensate for that now. Amelia noticed the subtle change in his expression. "Are you okay?" He hesitated. He didn't like to talk about his personal life, especially with a woman he hardly knew, but something about her made him let his guard down. even if only slightly. I'm just thinking about how Liam will react. He's never had a cake like that. Amelia raised her eyebrows. Really? Daniel nodded, diverting his gaze. She bit her lip, as if considering something, and then smiled. Then he deserves the best. And without Daniel knowing why, that answer made something inside him warm. In the next 20 minutes, they discussed colors, flavors, and final details. At one point, while Amelia was picking up a sample of frosting to show the texture, her fingers accidentally brushed against his. The contact was brief, but carried an unexpected spark. Daniel's eyes went to hers. Amelia felt her face heat up, but she disguised it, turning her attention back to the frosting. This one is perfect for modeling, firm enough for details, but creamy just right. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He wasn't listening properly. Not because he didn't want to, but because his attention had been lost in that brief moment. Her skin was soft. The touch, however accidental, had ignited something in him that he hadn't felt in years. Amelia, on the other hand, was trying to ignore the racing pulse. What was happening to her? He was just a customer, but there was something in the way he looked at her that made her breath catch for a second. After a moment of silence that felt a bit too long, Daniel coughed. Great, this seems right. Amelia forced herself to refocus. Perfect. The cake will be ready on the day of the party. I'll deliver it myself. Thank you. He turned to leave, but hesitated just like the first time. Will you be at the party? Amelia blinked, surprised. I usually don't stay at the parties. I just make the delivery. Liam would like to meet the person who made his cake. Amelia's heart jumped a little. He didn't need to say that. He could have simply thanked her and gone on with his life. But somehow he wanted her to be there. If it's not a problem, I can stay for a bit. Daniel nodded and, without saying anything else, left the confectionery. Amelia stood there for a moment, looking at the door through which he had disappeared. And then, unable to help herself, she smiled to herself. What the hell was happening to her? Outside, Daniel got into his car, closing the door with a sigh. He felt like he was crossing a dangerous line, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't know if he wanted to avoid it. He looked at his hands, still feeling the warmth of the brief touch he had shared with Amelia. The problem was that whenever he allowed himself to feel something, life always seemed to find a way to rip it away from him, and he didn't know if he was ready to risk it again. The day of the party dawned with a blue sky and a gentle breeze, bringing the promise of a perfect afternoon. Amelia woke up early, reviewing every detail of the cake she had spent hours perfecting. The main dinosaur, made of fondant, was strategically positioned on top, while small chocolate footprints decorated the sides. The volcano, the big highlight, was designed to surprise everyone at the moment of the cut, spilling hot syrup like melted lava. As she organized everything in the transport box, her heart raced for a reason that had nothing to do with baking. Daniel. Since their last meeting, she had tried to ignore the strange feeling that lingered after he left. The subtle tension, his gaze on hers, the moments of silence that spoke more than words. Everything indicated that something was growing between them, something neither of them seemed ready to admit. And today, she would see him again. Amelia took a deep breath, pushing the thoughts away as she carried the cake to the car. When she arrived at Daniel's mansion, she was impressed by the size of the place. The tall gate opened automatically, revealing a path lined with well-kept trees and a pristine lawn. At the back of the garden, the structure set up for the party was already decorated with colorful balloons, themed tables, and a reserved space for children's games. She got out of the car and carefully balanced the box in her hands. Before she could ring the doorbell, the door opened, revealing Daniel. He was wearing a light blue dress shirt with the first buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to the elbows. It wasn't too sophisticated, but on him, it worked incredibly well. You came. His voice had an almost imperceptible note of relief. I said I would, didn't I? Amelia smiled, but the nervousness danced in her stomach. Daniel looked at her for a moment before stepping aside. Come in. She crossed the threshold and found herself in an elegant hall, but not overly done. The house had a sophisticated touch, but it also carried a certain emptiness, as if there was a lack of life within those walls. You can leave the cake in the kitchen. Amelia followed Daniel to a modern and immaculate space. When she placed the box on the counter, she heard hurried footsteps approaching. Dad! Liam appeared at the door, his eyes shining with excitement. He was a boy with tousled brown hair and a smile that lit up his whole face. Daniel bent down to be at his son's level. Look who brought your cake. Liam looked at Amelia with curiosity before running to her. Did you make my cake? I did, Amelia smiled. With lots of chocolate and dinosaurs. I think you'll like it. The boy clapped his hands excitedly. Can I see it? Amelia exchanged a glance with Daniel before opening the box. As soon as the cake was revealed, Liam's eyes went wide. Wow, it's the best cake in the world. Daniel watched his son with a soft gaze, different from the reserved man Amelia had known until then. She noticed that when it came to Liam, he was a loving and present father, willing to do anything to see that smile. Are you going to stay for the party? Liam asked, full of expectation. Amelia hesitated. She will stay, Daniel replied before she could finish. She looked at him, surprised. Daniel held her gaze for a moment before looking away, as if realizing what he had just said. Amelia smiled at Liam. Well, if your dad is saying, I guess I can stay a little while. The boy cheered and ran off, eager to show the cake to his friends. He liked you, Daniel commented, crossing his arms. He's lovely. For a moment, silence settled between them. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was charged with unspoken words. Would you like a coffee before the party starts? He asked. I'd love one. While Daniel prepared the coffee, Amelia looked around, noticing details about him. The environment was organized, but in a way that seemed overly meticulous, as if he needed to keep everything under control all the time. She wondered what lay behind that need. The party started shortly after. Children ran around the garden, playing and laughing, while adults chatted under a white tent, decorated with subtle lights. Amelia blended in naturally, helping with small details, until at one point she noticed Daniel watching her from a distance. He had a glass in hand but wasn't drinking. He was just watching her, as if trying to understand something about her that eluded him. Then, as if something inside him gave way, Daniel began to walk in her direction. Are you having fun? He asked as he approached. Very much. He hesitated for a moment. It's been a while since I've seen Liam so happy at a birthday. Amelia felt the weight behind those words. He has you. That matters. More than anything else. Daniel looked away at his son, who was laughing as he ran with his friends. I tried to do my best. Amelia felt the urge to ask about the boy's mother, but she held back. She didn't want to intrude on something that still seemed like an open wound. The party went on, and when it was time for the birthday song, Liam could barely contain his excitement. When Daniel cut the cake and the lava of chocolate began to run down the top, the children screamed in ecstasy. Liam looked at Amelia with admiration. You're amazing, she laughed. I'm glad you liked it. As the party began to calm down, the guests started to say their goodbyes. Amelia was getting ready to leave when she felt a presence nearby. Daniel, thank you for coming. She turned to him. I should be the one thanking you. It was a beautiful party. They stood there, close to each other, the night breeze gently blowing. Daniel raised his hand as if to touch her face, but hesitated. Amelia held her breath. Then, finally, he closed the last centimeter that separated them. When his lips touched hers, it felt like the world around them dissolved. The kiss was intense and filled with something that had been restrained for too long. Daniel's hands gently held her face as Amelia surrendered to the moment, feeling the weight of that instant wash over her. And that's when she realized she was falling in love, and that could change everything. The kiss seemed to carry a desire held back for too long. Daniel held Amelia's face firmly, as if fearing that if he let go, the moment would slip through his fingers. She, in turn, reciprocated with intensity, her heart racing, her breath broken. For a moment, everything around them ceased to exist. The illuminated garden, the last guest saying goodbye, the distant sound of children's laughter, nothing else mattered. It was as if they had been pulled into a space where only the two of them existed. But then, as if reality began to impose itself again, Daniel slowly pulled away. Amelia kept her eyes closed for just one more second, still feeling the warmth of his touch. When she opened them, she found Daniel watching her, his gaze loaded with something she didn't know how to decipher. He began, but stopped. As if the words were escaping him, Amelia felt a chill in her stomach. Was he going to apologize? She didn't want to hear that. "You don't need to say anything." He frowned, confused. "No?" She smiled lightly, trying to ease the tension in the air. "No. I think we both know this was going to happen sooner or later." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "I wasn't planning on this." "Neither was I, but some things just happen." He ran his hand through his hair, as if trying to organize his own thoughts. "Amelia, my life is not simple." She tilted her head slightly. "And you think mine is?" Daniel watched her for a moment as if he were considering that. "I'm not saying this was a mistake, but you also don't know if it was right," Amelia completed, crossing her arms. Silence settled between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried a weight. Daniel took a deep breath. "I just need to process all of this." Amelia nodded, even though she felt a twinge of disappointment. "That's fine, but don't take too long." He furrowed his brow. "What?" "To decide if you want to take the risk," as Daniel didn't know what to say. Amelia gave him a brief smile and walked to her car. Before getting in, she looked back at him one last time. "Good night, Daniel." And then, without another word, she left. Daniel stood there, feeling his heart pounding too fast in his chest. Amelia was right. He just needed to decide. The problem was that for the first time in years, he didn't know what decision to make. The following days were a mix of tension and restrained desire. Daniel tried to convince himself that it was better to keep his distance, but at the same time, he caught himself thinking about her in the most unexpected moments. At the office, while reviewing contracts, on the way to pick up Liam from school, even at night when the silence of the house became deafening. Amelia, on the other hand, tried to follow her routine normally, but it was impossible to ignore the electricity in the air every time she received a message from him to talk about anything, whether it was the payment for the cake or a brief comment about Liam mentioning her name. The tension between the two grew with each casual encounter, every exchange of glances that lasted a second longer than necessary. Then one night, Daniel showed up at the bakery unannounced. Amelia was closing the register when the door opened and he walked in. Her heart skipped a beat. "Hi," he said, his voice rougher than normal. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "Hi. What are you doing here?" Daniel looked around as if he were trying to find the right answer. But then, instead of speaking, he simply walked up to her and held her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss came without warning. This time, there was no hesitation, only need. Daniel's hands cradled her neck, deepening the contact, while Amelia surrendered completely. When they separated, both were breathless. Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I gave up trying to avoid this. Amelia smiled against his lips. Good. He kissed her again, more slowly, savoring every second. And that's how it began. An intense, overwhelming passion that was impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, Daniel and Amelia began to see each other more frequently. At first, they were discreet moments, a quick coffee after her shift, a conversation in the car before he went to pick up Liam. But soon, their meetings became something more. Dinners that stretched for hours, stolen kisses in empty hallways, touches that spoke more than words. Daniel was allowing himself to feel again, and that terrified him. On a cold night, weeks after the party, Amelia and Daniel were in her apartment. The television was on, but neither of them was paying attention. Amelia was nestled against his chest on the sofa, her fingers drawing distracted circles on his arm. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing he was quieter than usual. Daniel hesitated before answering. "About how this is happening too fast." Amelia moved slightly away to look him in the eye. "Do you regret it?" He held her face, gently tracing his thumb over her cheek. "No." She smiled. "So what's the problem?" Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if he were trying to organize his thoughts. I'm scared." Amelia fell silent, waiting for him to continue. Scared of getting attached and losing again. Her heart tightened. "I'm not her, Daniel. I know. But the pain of losing someone you love makes you afraid to love again." Amelia held his hand. "You don't need to be afraid." He pulled her closer, holding her tightly. "I don't want to hurt you." She kissed him softly. "Then don't hurt me." Daniel looked at her for a long moment before responding. "I don't know if I can." Amelia knew in that instant that he was still fighting against his own ghosts, and that sooner or later those ghosts would catch up to them. But for now, she decided to just enjoy, because what they had was real. And even without guarantees, she was willing to take the risk. The sky was clear that afternoon, with a gentle sun illuminating the streets. The wind carried the smell of wet earth, a remnant of the rain from the previous night. Amelia was at the candy store finishing an order when her phone vibrated on the counter. It was Daniel. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron before answering. "Hi, you disappeared today," she joked, hoping to hear his voice on the other side. But what came was not the answer she expected. "Amelia." Daniel's voice sounded different, harsh, breathless. "I'm at the hospital." She froze. "What? What happened?" "Liam fell off his bike. He hit his head. The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. My God, is he okay?" Daniel let out a shaky sigh. "I don't know. The doctors are still evaluating." Amelia didn't think twice. "Which hospital are you in?" He told her the name, and she hung up immediately, ripping off her apron and grabbing the car keys. During the drive, her heart raced. She tried to push away the worst thoughts, but it was impossible not to imagine Daniel there, desperate, seeing his injured son. When she arrived at the hospital, she found Daniel standing in the hallway, his elbows resting on his legs, his head down. He looked shattered. The suit he wore was disheveled, the tie loose, his hair messy as if he had run his hands through it countless times. When he lifted his face and saw her, something in his expression broke. Amelia approached without hesitation. "How is he?" Daniel ran his hand over his face, visibly shaken. "They're still doing tests." He woke up, but he was confused. "They said it's normal, but He stopped, swallowing hard. "I shouldn't have let him ride his bike alone." Amelia held his hand. "Daniel, it wasn't your fault." He didn't respond. His gaze was distant, fixed on the closed door. In front of him. "I promised myself that Liam would never go through anything like this. Kids fall, Daniel. He will be okay." He finally looked at her, and Amelia saw the pain there. "I can't lose anyone else." The words were a whisper, but they carried the weight of a choked scream. Before she could respond, the door to the room opened and a doctor appeared. "Liam's father." Daniel jumped to his feet. "Yes, that's me. How is he?" The doctor smiled slightly. "He's okay. The tests didn't show anything serious. He only had a mild concussion, but he is stable. We will monitor him for a few hours, but he can go home today." Amelia breathed out the air she hadn't realized she was holding. Daniel, on the other hand, stood still for a moment, as if absorbing the news. "Can I see him?" "Of course." Daniel entered the room, and Amelia stayed behind, respecting that moment between father and son. But minutes later, he reappeared at the door, looking at her. "Come with me?" She didn't hesitate. Liam was lying down, his eyes somewhat sleepy. But when he saw Amelia, he smiled. "You came." She approached and held his little hand. "Of course I came. You scared me, you know." Liam made a face. "I was scared too. But now I'm okay." Daniel stood by, watching the interaction. For the first time, he saw how Liam already viewed Amelia as part of his life. And that terrified him. Fear grew inside him like a shadow, fear that things were moving too fast. Fear that Liam would form bonds and in the end would end up hurt. Fear of losing control again, and at that moment he made a decision. Later back home, Daniel put Liam to bed, making sure he was comfortable before turning off the light in the room. When he closed the door, he found Amelia waiting for him in the living room. Did he sleep? Yes. She sighed, relieved. It was a long day. Daniel crossed his arms. "Amelia, I need to talk to you." She noticed something different in his tone. "What is it?" He took a deep breath before continuing. "This, between us, it's going too fast." Amelia frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel looked away as if afraid of what he was about to say. "I need to take a step back." The impact of those words felt like a punch to the stomach. "What? I can't risk this right now. Liam needs stability." Amelia blinked, trying to process. "You think I'm a threat to his stability?" "It's not that, Amelia. But he's already getting attached to you. And what if this doesn't work out?" She felt a mix of anger and pain grow inside her. "So the solution is just to give up?" Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. "I just need some time." Amelia laughed, without humor. "Sometime, right?" She grabbed her bag, feeling her hands tremble. Daniel stepped forward. "Amelia." She raised her hand, cutting him off. "Don't say anything else." And without looking back, she walked out the door. As soon as she left, Daniel ran, his hands over his face, feeling miserable. He thought he was protecting everyone, but deep down he knew he was only protecting himself. Protecting himself from what he felt for her. And that could be his biggest mistake. The sound of the rain against the window was the only thing filling the silence in the small candy shop. Amelia was sitting at one of the empty tables, staring at the cup of coffee in front of her without really seeing it. Ever since that night at Daniel's house, something inside her felt broken. She didn't cry when she left there, not even when she got home and lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling for hours. But now, the pain settled in every corner of her chest, because deep down, she knew. Daniel wasn't just asking for a break, he was running away. And worse still, she could do nothing to stop it. The days that followed were a blur. Daniel disappeared. No messages, no calls. Amelia refused to look for him. She was too proud to chase after someone who had pushed her away without hesitation. But that didn't make his absence any less painful. The candy shop, once her refuge, now felt too empty. Her sweets no longer had the same charm. She found herself distracted in the middle of an order, mixing up the wrong ingredients, forgetting batches in the oven for too long. The loyal customers noticed. "Is everything okay, Amelia?" asked a lady who always bought pies on Saturdays. She forced a smile, just a little tired. But the truth was, she hadn't slept right in days. Daniel, on the other hand, tried to convince himself he had made the right choice. He kept busy with work, dedicated himself to Liam more than ever, filling every second of the day so as not to give space to that restlessness growing inside him. But nothing worked. Amelia was there, in the thoughts he tried to push away, in the sweet scent of vanilla he swore he could smell even when he was alone, in the moments when he looked at Liam and saw in the boy a reflection of the same longing he felt, because Liam missed her too. "Isn't Amelia coming anymore?" he asked one night while playing with the fork on his plate. Daniel froze. "She's busy with the candy shop." Liam looked at him for a moment. "Did you fight with her?" Daniel looked away. "Not exactly." "Then why did she disappear?" He didn't know how to respond. How could he explain to an 8-year-old boy that as much as he wanted Amelia close, fear spoke louder? Liam sighed. "I liked her." Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment. "So did I." But that didn't change anything. On the 5th day since the separation, Amelia decided she needed to distract herself. She accepted a friend's invitation to go out, something she'd been refusing for a while. A quiet bar, a bit of live music, some laughter. Maybe that's what she needed. But even there, amidst conversations and clinking glasses, her mind drifted back to Daniel. She picked up her phone, stared at the screen. No messages from him. She sighed, setting the device aside. "You're a disaster, friend." Carol, her friend, observed her with a gaze full of compassion. Amelia forced a smile. "I'll be fine." Carol raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? Because you look like you're about to throw that glass against the wall." Amelia laughed, but the laughter died quickly. "I just don't understand. Why did he push me away like that?" Carol took a sip of her drink before answering. "Because he's an idiot. He's scared." Which is the same thing. Amelia sighed. "He lost his wife, Carol. I understand that must have messed up a lot inside him. But that doesn't give him the right to treat you like a problem." Amelia remained silent. Carol continued. "You deserve someone who fights for you, not someone who runs away." The words hit Amelia hard. She knew Carol was right, but knowing didn't make it any easier to forget. Daniel was alone in the office that night. The documents in front of him were untouched. The truth was, he couldn't concentrate on anything. The phone sat on the desk. How many times had he picked up the device, opened the screen, and typed Amelia's name? But he never sent the message, because if he spoke to her, if he saw her again, he knew he wouldn't be able to stick to the decision to distance himself. And he needed to stick to that decision. Not for him, but for Liam. The boy had already lost his mother. He couldn't form ties with someone who in the end might leave. It was better this way. It was the right thing to do. But if it was the right thing, why did he feel like he was falling apart? The next day, Amelia arrived early at the candy shop. She had decided it was time to move on. She needed to focus on what really mattered, her work, her dream of expanding the business. But when she opened her email, she found an unexpected message. It was from an old friend who now lived in another city. "Amelia, I have a proposal for you. An amazing pastry course at one of the best schools. I thought of you right away. I know you've always wanted to improve. It's a few months of classes and you can still work part-time. Let me know if you want more details." Amelia read and reread the message. A renowned course, an opportunity to grow, and suddenly it made sense. She needed to get out of there. If Daniel wanted distance, she would give it. But she wouldn't sit still waiting for him to change his mind. She was leaving, and this time, without looking back. The decision was made on a quiet night. with only the dim light from the kitchen illuminating Amelia's small apartment. She sat at the table, staring at the open email on her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I accept the opportunity. Send me the details." Before she could hesitate, she pressed send. Her heart raced in her chest. That was it. She was leaving, and for the first time in weeks, she felt she was regaining control of her own life. The next day, Amelia began preparing everything for her departure. The course would last a few months, enough for her to distance herself from the city and everything that kept her there. The bakery would not close completely. She would leave, a trusted employee in charge of the smaller orders until her return. But deep down, she knew she was not just leaving a business behind. She was leaving Daniel, and she needed to do this to heal. On the other side of the city, Daniel had no idea what was about to happen. He was still convincing himself that he had made the right choice, that keeping his distance was better for everyone. But as the days passed, that decision began to feel like an unbearable weight. Liam kept asking about Amelia. Her name lingered in his mind during the most random moments. Her scent still seemed to be imbued in his memories, and on a cold night, sitting in his dark office, Daniel finally admitted to himself he missed her more than he should, more than it was safe to feel, and he didn't know what to do with that. Amelia left on a cloudy morning, driving away from the city that had been her home for so many years. With every kilometer she left behind, she felt as if a part of her life was unraveling. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. She took a deep breath and accelerated. It was time to start over. The days in the new city passed quickly and intensely. The pastry course was everything Amelia had always dreamed of: advanced techniques, renowned chefs, new opportunities. She dedicated herself completely, absorbing every detail, putting her passion into every dish she prepared. It was as if she were rediscovering the reason she had started in pastry making, and for a while she managed to believe that she was okay. But then there were the nights. The nights were treacherous. It was during them that Daniel returned, in thoughts, in dreams, in the empty spaces of the bed where she wished he would be. But he wasn't, and she had to accept that. Daniel took a while to realize that something was wrong. Maybe because he was too busy trying to ignore the longing. Or maybe because he was avoiding facing the obvious. It was Renata, his friend and confidant, who brought the truth to light. They were having lunch together when she dropped the bomb. "You know that Amelia is gone, right?" Daniel's fork stopped halfway. He frowned. "What?" Renata tilted her head, surprised. "You didn't know? What do you mean she's gone?" She moved away. "A specialization course, something like that. She'll be gone for months." Daniel felt his stomach churn. She was gone. She was really gone. He dropped the fork, leaning back in his chair, stunned. Renata watched his reaction closely. "You let her go, without even trying to stop her." Daniel ran his hands over his face. "I didn't even know she wanted to go." "And why do you think she did, Daniel?" He fell silent. Renata sighed. "You pushed her to that." Daniel closed his eyes tightly, feeling the weight of the truth in those words. Yes, he had pushed Amelia away, and now he didn't know if he could bring her back. But deep down, he knew he had to try, before it was too late. The day was cold, with a biting wind sweeping through the streets of the new city where Amelia now lived. It had been weeks since she left everything behind, and even trying to convince herself that this change was exactly what she needed, the feeling of emptiness persisted. Her time was filled with intense classes, rigorous pastry tests, and new techniques that honed her talent. But at the end of the day, when she returned to her small rented apartment, the silence reminded her of what she had left behind, of whom she had left behind, Daniel. She wondered if he even missed her, if he thought of her as she thought of him. But whenever these thoughts surfaced, Amelia drowned them in work. It was better this way, or at least that's what she told herself. Meanwhile, in the city she had left behind, Daniel was a mess. Since he learned that Amelia had gone away, he felt as if something were out of place. He tried to stick to his routine, keeping himself busy with Liam and the business, but nothing filled the void left by her absence. And Renata, always observant, quickly noticed this. "You need to do something, Daniel," she said as they had coffee in his office. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And what exactly do you suggest I do? She's gone." Renata rolled her eyes. "She left because you pushed her to it." He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. "And what if I go after her and it's too late?" Renata crossed her arms. "And what if it's too late because you didn't try?" He fell silent, reflecting. Then he made a decision. "Where is she?" Renata smiled. It was about time. 2 days later, Daniel was standing in front of a charming cafe in the city center where Amelia now lived. The place had a cozy vibe with exposed brick walls and a showcase full of artistically decorated suites. That was where she worked on the days she wasn't in class. His heart raced in his chest. He didn't know what he was going to say or whether she even wanted to see him, but he had to try. So he took a deep breath and walked in. The smell of coffee and vanilla engulfed him immediately, bringing a familiar feeling. And then he saw her. Amelia was behind the counter, focused, preparing a cup of coffee for a customer. Her hair was tied up in a bun, with a few strands falling around her face. She wore a light apron, her skilled hands moving delicately. Daniel felt the air escape from his lungs. She was beautiful. And for the first time, he realized how much he had missed her. Amelia looked up and froze. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the cup she was holding. It was as if time had stopped. His eyes were fixed on hers, laden with something she couldn't decipher. The coffee she was holding nearly slipped from her hands. "Daniel." The voice came out as a whisper, as if she couldn't believe he was really there. He took a step forward, but before he could say anything, something happened. A male voice called for Amelia. "Amelia, your coffee is ready." She looked away. At a tall man with an easy smile approaching the counter, Daniel felt his stomach twist. The man casually placed his hand on her back, too intimate for Daniel's liking. Amelia blinked, looking as unsettled as he was. "Oh yes, here it is." She quickly pushed the cup towards the guy, avoiding looking at Daniel. The man took the coffee, but noticed the strange atmosphere. He looked from Daniel to Amelia and raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay here?" "Yes." Amelia responded too quickly. Daniel, on the other hand, felt as if the ground was opening, up beneath his feet. Had she moved on? The idea that Amelia might be with someone else hit Daniel like a punch. The man smiled at her before turning away and sitting at a nearby table. Daniel finally found his voice. "You moved on?" Amelia closed her eyes for a moment before letting out a heavy sigh. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" He didn't respond immediately, because at that moment a third person was witnessing everything. Renata. She had come along to support Daniel, but upon entering the cafe and seeing the scene before her, she felt something unexpected. Jealousy. It didn't make sense. She had never seen Daniel any other way than as a friend, but seeing the intensity in his gaze as he stared at Amelia stirred something inside her. And then, when Amelia responded to Daniel's question, Renata knew she was witnessing something much bigger than she had imagined. "Daniel, I haven't moved on," Amelia said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I needed to step away. You forced me to do that." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Amelia continued, her eyes shining. I came here because I needed to heal, because I needed to understand that I am more than someone you can just push away when you feel afraid. Daniel didn't know what to say, but Renata did. She knew that at that moment Amelia and Daniel were at a point of no return, and for the first time she felt something strange grow within her. Something that shouldn't be there, because at that instant, while watching the scene before her, she realized she had never seen Daniel fight for someone like that, and, as absurd as it was, a part of her wondered, what if it were her? The silence that settled between Amelia and Daniel seemed to weigh tons. She was still feeling the shock of seeing him there in the cafe where she now worked, after weeks of trying to bury the feelings he caused her. Daniel, on the other hand, was struggling to catch his breath. He had crossed cities to find her. He had rehearsed every word, every argument. But now, in front of her, everything he had rehearsed vanished. "Why did you come here, Daniel?" Amelia finally broke the silence, crossing her arms. The question caught Daniel by surprise. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. He took a deep breath before meeting her gaze. "Because I realized I made a mistake." Amelia laughed, but there was no humor in her voice. "A mistake? You want me to believe you only realized this now?" "I thought I was protecting Liam and myself." Amelia shook her head, incredulous. "And in the process you hurt me." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. "I know." She let out a heavy sigh, looking away. "You pushed me away, Daniel. You said you needed time, but what you really wanted was to run away. And now all of a sudden you show up here. What do you want from me?" He hesitated for a second, but then he did something he had never done before. He stepped forward and took her hands. Amelia tensed, but she didn't pull away. Daniel looked directly into her eyes. "I want you." Her heart skipped a beat. He continued, "I want to go home with you. I want Liam to have you around again. I want to make things right." Amelia felt her eyes burn. "You want all this now. But what about when the fear comes? Back, Daniel? Are you going to run away again?" Daniel swallowed hard. "No." His voice came out steady. "Because I finally understood." Amelia blinked, confused. "What?" He gently held her face, his thumb caressing her skin. "That, I'm afraid, yes. But that the thought of losing you is infinitely worse than any fear I might have." Amelia felt her heart tighten. She wanted to believe. She desperately wanted to, but she was still hurt. "Daniel, I spent weeks trying to convince myself that you wouldn't come back, that I needed to move on without you." He nodded, his eyes full of guilt. "I know." Amelia took a deep breath. "And now you show up and think that everything can just go back to the way it was." Daniel held her gaze. "No, I know it can't. But I want to try. I want to fight for you, for what we have." Amelia shut her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were full of tears. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Daniel felt a knot in his throat. "Tell me how." She blinked, confused. "How? How can I prove to you that I am here to stay? Tell me what to do." Amelia shook her head. "That's not how it works, Daniel. You can't just ask me to tell you how to fix everything." He let out a shaky sigh. "Then I will figure it out, but I won't give up on you." Amelia felt the weight of those words. Daniel had always been a man of definitive decisions. And there, before her, he had made a decision he would not back down from. She wanted to believe, but could she? Meanwhile, Renata watched everything from afar. She still felt the strange warmth inside her. Seeing Daniel fight for Amelia like that had awakened something she didn't understand. For years, she and Daniel had only been friends. But now she wondered if things would have been different. If perhaps in another life, it was she there hearing those words. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. That was madness. But then, looking at Daniel again, she felt something tighten in her chest. And she knew that, one way or another, that story was also about to change her life, forever. The journey back home was silent. Amelia still wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing. Accepting to go back with Daniel didn't mean that all her doubts had disappeared. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that his words were real. But the fear remained, and Daniel knew that. He didn't try to force her to talk during the ride. Instead, he kept his hand firmly intertwined with hers while driving, as if he was silently showing that he wouldn't let go. Not this time. When they arrived in the city, Amelia felt her chest tighten at the sight of the familiar streets. It was strange to be back after everything that had happened. It felt like another life. Daniel parked in front of her building and turned off the engine. He remained silent for a moment before turning to her. "I know I need to win back your trust." Amelia stared at him, trying to ignore how her heart raced just being near him. "Yes, you need to." He nodded. "Then, let me try one day at a time." She stayed silent for a moment. Then she took a deep breath. "All right, but no empty promises, Daniel. Never again." The next day, Amelia reopened the bakery. The loyal customers were thrilled to see her back. Some neighbors came in just to welcome her, saying how much they missed her sweets. And Amelia realized how much she had missed that place too. It was her home, her story. She had tried to run away, but deep down, she knew she belonged there. And then, in the middle of the afternoon, the doorbell rang. When she looked to see who it was, her heart skipped a beat. Liam rushed in, a huge smile on his face. "Amelia!" Before she could react, the boy hugged her tightly. She closed her eyes, feeling the longing tighten in her chest. "I missed you," he said, his voice muffled against her apron. Amelia swallowed hard, holding back tears. "I missed you too, champ." Daniel walked in right behind, watching. The scene in silence. Their eyes met, and in that moment Amelia knew he was trying, and maybe, just maybe, she could give him a chance. For him, for them, for everything that was yet to come. Time passed, and little by little, Amelia and Daniel began to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy. Amelia still carried the insecurity of being pushed away again. Daniel, for his part, fought against the fear of fully giving himself up. But day after day, with small gestures and honest conversations, they found their way back to each other. And Liam was radiant. For the boy, it was as if his family was finally coming together again. And then, when everything seemed to finally fit into place, it happened. The great turnaround. It was a quiet afternoon when Amelia decided to close the dessert shop early to spend some time with Daniel and Liam. She was crossing the street towards Daniel's car when everything changed in an instant. The sound of an accelerated engine, the bright headlights coming from the wrong direction, the distant scream of someone on the sidewalk, and then the impact. Amelia had no time to react. The car came at full force, hitting her squarely. Her body was tossed into the air before crashing hard against the asphalt. Daniel saw everything. His heart stopped the moment Amelia fell to the ground, motionless. The world around him became a blur. He ran to her, feeling the blood freeze in his veins. "Amelia!" She didn't respond. There was blood on her forehead, slowly running down her face. Her eyes were half closed, her chest rising and falling in a weak rhythm. Liam cried beside them, too scared to understand what was happening. Daniel felt a despair he had never known. He held her carefully, his own breath ragged. "Amelia, stay with me, please." She blinked slowly, trying to focus on him, and then, in a whisper almost inaudible, she said, "I love you." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest, because he knew he loved her too. He had always loved her, but he had never had the courage to say so, and now it might be too late. The ambulance arrived minutes later, but for Daniel, it felt like an eternity. He held Amelia's hand the whole time, refusing to let go. And as they loaded her into the ambulance, he made a decision. This time, there would be no fear. There would be no escape. He loved her, and he would fight for her with everything he had. Hours later at the hospital, Daniel waited with a tight chest. Every minute that passed without news was torment. Liam slept in Renata's lap, exhausted from crying so much, and then, finally, the doctor appeared. "She is out of danger." Daniel felt such intense relief that he almost fell to his knees. But the doctor continued. "She had a mild concussion and a broken arm. She will need rest, but she will be fine." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the emotion take over. She was going to be fine. Amelia was going to be fine, and he would never let anything separate them again. When he entered the room, he saw Amelia lying there, pale but awake. She smiled weakly when she saw him. Daniel walked to the bed and held her hand gently. "You scared me?" She laughed softly. "I scared myself." He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I need to tell you something." Amelia watched him attentively. Daniel squeezed her hand tighter. "I love you." Her eyes sparkled. "Daniel, I should have said it before. I should have shouted it to the world, but I was a coward." She brought her hand to his face, caressing his skin. "You're here now." He nodded. "And I'm never going anywhere without you again." And then he leaned in and kissed her. A kiss full of promises, full of love, because in the end, destiny always finds a way to bring together those who truly belong to each other. And Daniel knew that, for the first time, he was exactly where he should be. Next to Amelia, forever. The golden sun spread across the sky, painting soft shades of orange and pink on the horizon. A light breeze swayed the curtains of the bakery window, bringing with it the smell of sponge cake freshly out of the oven. The sweet and familiar aroma filled the space, blending with children's laughter and the clinking of coffee cups on saucers. Amelia was behind the counter, stirring a bowl of pastry cream, feeling more alive than ever. It had been 6 months since the accident, and recovery had been a challenge. The cast on her arm, the constant pain and physical therapy were part of a slow and painful process. But at no moment was she alone. Daniel had been by her side every day. He held her hand during therapy sessions. He made soups when she couldn't cook. And every night he lay beside her, whispering words that warmed her heart. "I am here, and I will never go anywhere." And he kept that promise. Now, there she was, back in the place she loved most in the world, her bakery. But this time, something was different. She wasn't just resuming her life. She was building something new. "Amelia, the order from table 5 is ready," said Anna, her employee and now close friend. Amelia nodded, wiping her hands on her apron and taking the pastries to the table. The place was full as always. The clientele had doubled since her return. Part of it was due to Amelia's undeniable talent, but also the story that had spread throughout the town. The baker who almost lost everything but came back stronger than ever. "Mummy, can I put the sprinkles on?" Amelia looked over and smiled to see Liam standing on a stool, eager to help with the cupcake decorations. "Of course you can, champ, but don't go overboard, okay?" Liam laughed, grabbing a handful of colorful sprinkles and scattering them over the cupcakes. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene with a discreet smile. If someone had told him months ago that he would be there, living this life, he wouldn't have believed it. But now he couldn't imagine anything different. He moved closer, putting an arm around Amelia's waist and kissing her temple. "It looks beautiful as always," she smiled, leaning into him. "Thank you, but I think we have a little rising baker." Liam raised his arms like a champion. "I'm going to be the best helper for Mommy." Amelia and Daniel exchanged a glance. The word "mommy" had spontaneously slipped from the boy's lips. Amelia felt her eyes welling up but said nothing. She merely kissed Liam's forehead and ruffled his hair. Daniel squeezed her hand, as if wordlessly saying he had noticed too. And that, it meant everything. Months later, Amelia stood before the mirror, adjusting the final details of her white dress. It was a simple, elegant model, without exaggeration, exactly as she had always dreamed. "You look wonderful." Renata appeared by her side, smiling sincerely. Renata. So much had changed since that day at the cafe when her friend realized her feelings for Daniel were more complex than she had imagined. But in the end, she understood. Daniel and Amelia were made for each other, and after a few weeks stepping away to reorganize her own life, Renata returned with a lighter heart, ready to support her friend as she always had. Now, there she was, helping Amelia prepare for the most important moment of her life, the wedding. Amelia took a deep breath, trying to contain her emotions. "It's all happening so fast," Renata laughed. "You actually took too long." Amelia laughed along. And then, when the music began to play outside, she knew. She knew that everything she had lived until that moment, the pain, the losses, the fears, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. She picked up her bouquet, took one last look in the mirror, and walked to meet the man she loved. Daniel waited at the altar, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. But at that moment, nothing mattered, except the woman approaching him. When Amelia entered, holding the flowers with slightly trembling hands, he knew he would never live a day without her again. Liam ran up to them along the way, holding Amelia's hand and leading her to Daniel. It was a simple gesture, but filled with meaning. Daniel took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers, and in Amelia's eyes he saw everything he had always needed: love, trust, certainty. Because some love stories are made of storms, but the ones that truly matter always find a way to reach the sun again. And on that golden afternoon, surrounded by friends and family, Amelia and Daniel promised each other that from then on there would be no more fears, only love, and the certainty that together they could face anything. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us what moved you the most. We want to know your opinion, and if you believe that love always finds a way, share this story with someone special. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories that warm the soul.